Okay, this is session 4 of the spiritual fitness component of Restart Your Heart. I'm Dale Fletcher again with Faith and Health Connection. The last 2 sessions we looked at sin, stress, and your health, and kind of in 2 parts, right? We've covered God's perfect design, how He created us, spirit, soul, and body, and nothing happens in isolation. We talked about our deepest spiritual needs and how we can kind of mess up God's perfect design when we live life outside of God's boundaries and apart from Him and His ways. And the impact of original sin, our sin, and the sins of others against us, and how that can impact upon our physiology and our behaviors. Then we explored the different sources of stress. And last session, we talked about the unique kind of stress that we have in our life, and I like to call them spiritual risk factors, issues of the heart, to include the impact that early life trauma can have on our heart, and eventually, if it's not managed well at all, on our behaviors and on our physiology and on our health. So that's what we covered in the last 2 sessions on this topic of sin, stress, and your health. This session, session 4, we're going to look at a little bit about the physiology of stress and poorly managed stress, and then the outcome that our poorly managed stress can have on us, on our physical health, on our behaviors, and just a little bit, we're going to focus again on the impact that early life trauma can have on health issues. So again, you'll want to get your worksheet out and your PowerPoint slides that accompany this session. And of course, you can pause this video if you need to until you get that, and then restart. Okay. I'm not going to go really too deep, but suffice it to say that because God designed us to live in a perfect state, if you will, like Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden before they committed the original sin, our bodies were not meant to be exposed to chronic stressors and frequent stressors of a very high intensity. When we are exposed to chronic stress, especially toxic, very emotionally charged stressors in our life, our health systems break down, and eventually the weak links in our body show up, and we can have health conditions, diseases, and even death. And this slide just generally depicts some of the mechanisms that are going on. Again, it's not to be thorough, but just to give you an appreciation of the impact that stress can have on our emotions. And many of the emotions that are toxic here are listed: anger, fear, guilt, shame, and anxiety. And it's especially when these emotions are suppressed and not expressed, and we carry these emotions internally, deep inside us. Sometimes they get stored. There's some fascinating research on this, but stored emotions are what really eat away at us, literally. It affects our autonomic nervous system, is activated. The stress response then is a cascading of chemicals, hormones that are bad for us, and they spill into our system. Okay, in addition to that pathway, we have oxidation, we have inflammation, and weakening in the immune system, which makes us susceptible to diseases and autoimmune diseases. So if we rely on our own resources, then we will eventually probably pay heavily. So we need the help of others, socially, medically, spiritually, but especially God and His ways, so that we can cope with some of the life events that we have. And so on this slide, and you have a copy of this in your paper PowerPoint handouts, are some possible symptoms and effects of stress. And I would hope that maybe that you are aware generally that this connection exists. But as you look at this list, I'd like you to reflect on your own life, your past life experiences, maybe some of your health issues, even current health issues. And if not you, some of your loved ones, how there may be a relationship between the conditions that are depicted on this slide and chronic stress in your life. So just take a look at that list here. Just as an example, in a study at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, researchers found that chronic stress, especially ongoing conflict at home or at work, increased people's chances of developing colds by 3 to 5 times. That's just one instance. The research is full of documentation that exists between these types of conditions and stressors in our life, especially the chronic stress. So are you able to relate to some of these items on this list? And then last week we looked at early life trauma, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, or ACEs study. And this is a little bit different graphic, but it presents the information that you have on a chart that I shared with you earlier, and you have a copy of this, not this slide, but another slide that lists these types of 10 different types of stressors, either abuse, neglect, or household dysfunctions, those 3 categories of stressors, toxic stress, that sure have a direct relationship between these types of stressors and life events, okay? So adverse childhood experiences have been linked to risky health behaviors, chronic health conditions, low life potential, and even early death. And I'm going to show you a listing here. And again, my heart goes out to you if you can relate to personally experiencing one or more of these types of early life trauma. It can be devastating. And my prayers are that you have kind of overcome and healed from the kind of abuse that is listed on this slide here. And if not fully healed, that you'll consider opening up your heart, maybe in a deeper way, and allowing God or a trusted professional or a counselor or somebody at your church to walk alongside you to facilitate a greater degree of healing. So this slide depicts some of the mechanisms. Again, I'm not going to go over this in detail, but suffice it to say on the left-hand slide here are depict these kinds of abuses. And if they occur at times when a child is in their developmental stages, then the brain and the genes can actually be changed and rewired, or wired in the case of a young child, in such a way that the electrical, chemical, and cellular masses that are developed are conducive to behaviors and the physiology such that the body is affected in ways that are depicted on the outside right, from chronic diseases to mental health conditions to impaired functioning of the brain, poor work and school performance, obesity, and the other kinds of behaviors and conditions and issues that are listed on the right-hand side. Okay, so this gives you an appreciation of the pathway from what might happen early in life to even 50 years later in life because of the wiring of the brain and the development of a person. And that translates in this ACEs study to a greater risk for these health issues that are listed on this slide. The more categories of early life stressors, the research in this ACEs study found that there was a strong and direct relationship between those stressors in life, toxic, traumatic stress, and these conditions and behaviors. So really the obvious question is, do you see yourself? If you can relate to some of your early life experiences that may have been captured on those categories of toxic stress and these conditions depicted upon the slide, and maybe other conditions. These are just the ones that were documented in this study. It's not to say there can't be other health issues or sin-related issues, like pornography as an example, that could very likely be traced back to early life trauma. Okay. So you see, in many cases, when our physicians and healthcare providers and even spiritual counselors might look at us or our past life experiences and our medical charts, or maybe the physicians examine our bodies, instead of asking what's wrong with you, maybe the more appropriate question would be, what happened to you? And I'd like to share with you 3 or 4 slides just to visually represent. Don't worry about the numbers. What I want you to appreciate is the trend, the relationship. The ACE study reveals that there is a graded dose response. That means there's just this kind of stepwise progression, a very incremental progression. And the more categories of stressors that an individual experienced, the greater likelihood for disease and unhealthy behaviors, such as alcoholism on this slide. Here's a slide that shows the relationship between early life trauma and smoking as an adult. And the use of antidepressant prescriptions. A direct relationship. And finally, severe obesity with a body mass index of 35 or greater. A direct relationship. Remember, I shared with you that this ACEs study came about because of the experiences that many people had in a weight loss program at a healthcare system in San Diego, California. And the people dropped out of that program even though they were making significant weight loss changes and behavior changes. They stopped the program because they were losing enough weight that they felt that their bodies might physically become attractive to members of the opposite sex. Members of the opposite sex who had previously abused them sexually. And so in this case, their weight gain and their maintenance of weight gain, to the degree that it was even severely obese, was protective in nature. It was a solution, not a problem for them. So obesity can be a really delicate issue to attend to the root problems and not just nutrition and physical activity. So to recap, this is how God's perfect design for wholeness gets messed up. We often fail to apply God's principles and truths, especially related to trying to manage the potential stressors of our life, the life circumstances that are really challenging. We choose unhealthy beliefs, attitudes, and lifestyles, and develop unhealthy habits and addictions. Why? To cope with the hurt and the pain and the disappointment of life. We often embrace or turn to what we might call in the Christian church idols, because they take the place of God. We incur spiritual risk factors due to many of these life events that I've been explaining, or due to loss. And our bodies react not only behaviorally to cope in an unhealthy way, but physiologically as well, in response to the emotions that these stressors bring upon us. So to end this session, I would like you to spend some time with question number 7 on your worksheet that asks what health issues or behaviors or problems or sin, maybe chronic sin, might be associated with your unhealthy habits, spiritual risk factors, or unresolved issues of the heart. Again, I'm going to try to play a song here to let you just rest with that question a little bit. Okay, as in previous sessions, you might not have adequate time right now, I know, to reflect thoroughly on this question. So I'd like you to maybe set that aside and revisit this later on in the day or in the evening, or when you have a chance, and can really kind of sit with it and ponder it. So again, my goal has been to help you more fully appreciate and be aware of this connection between poorly managed stressors of our life, issues of the heart, and how that can get us into trouble with our mental health, with our relationship health, with our emotional health, and even our physical health, okay? And in the upcoming sessions, we're going to explore what God's Word has to say about how do we apply His Word and our relationship with Him that would maybe more favor improved health and well-being. So until next time, God bless. Continue with your Restart Your Heart physical activity program and nutritious eating, and manage your stress in a healthy way. And I'll be talking with you in a few days. God bless.